After 28 years of marriage, I caught my husband and my younger sister cheating. I didn't scream. I just led them straight into my trap. The photograph was 4 inches by 6 inches, glossy, clear, time-stamped 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. When I was supposed to be 45 minutes away at a conference luncheon, I had left early because the speaker was boring and my feet hurt. Robert on our couch, the couch I picked out, the couch we argued over because he wanted gray and I wanted cream and I won. Kate in his lap, my sister, my little sister, who I had driven to her first day of college because she was too scared to take the bus, who I had sat with in the ER at 3 in the morning when she broke her arm falling off a bar stool at 24 and didn't want to call our mother, who had been the maid of honor at my wedding, this marriage, this man. Her fingers were twisted in his hair. I held the photograph for a long time in a bank parking lot on a Tuesday morning while the engine ticked as it cooled and a sparrow landed on my side mirror and looked at me sideways before flying off. Then I put it in a manila envelope with the divorce papers I had already signed and the letter my mother wrote me from her deathbed that she told me to open only when I needed it most. I drove home, made dinner, and asked Robert how his day was. He said, "Long." "Mine too," I said, and I smiled like I meant it. "I need you to understand who I was before I tell you what I did. My name is Miriam. I am 56 years old. I spent 28 years married to a man named Robert Haas, 1B short of normal, just like him, I suppose, though I didn't see that clearly for a long time. I was a high school history teacher for 19 years. I retired early to take care of my mother when she got sick. I make very good soup. I can name every U.S. Secretary of State since 1945 in order. I have never in my life raised my voice in anger at someone who didn't deserve it. I am telling you this because what follows will make me look calculating, and I want you to know that I am not, by nature, a calculating person. I became one, temporarily, out of necessity. Robert and I met in 1995 at a faculty development seminar in Riverside. He taught geography. I taught history. We argued for 45 minutes about whether geography was even a real discipline or just history with better maps. He bought me coffee afterward and said I was the most infuriating person he had ever found attractive. I thought that was the most honest thing any man had ever said to me. We were married 14 months later. We had a good marriage. I want to be careful here because I've heard women in my situation say I thought we had a good marriage with a kind of hollow resignation, and I don't mean it that way. I mean it factually. We were kind to each other. We were faithful. I had been, and I had believed him to be. We laughed. We traveled when we could afford to. We sat on the back porch on summer evenings and talked about nothing important, and it was enough. We lost a pregnancy in 2001, and it nearly broke us, but we held on. We built a life that was small and solid and genuinely ours. At least I thought we did. My sister Kate is 11 years younger than me. She grew up partly in my shadow. I was the responsible one, the one our parents pointed to, and she was vivid and impulsive and sometimes exhausting, and I loved her without reservation. She had been divorced once, briefly, at 30. She was 45 now, still unmarried, still cycling through enthusiasms and new starts. She had been close to Robert for years in the comfortable way that family members sometimes are, easy dinners, teasing, inside jokes, and I had never thought twice about it because why would I? I'm telling you all of this because you need to feel the weight of what Thursday afternoon cost me. The first thing I noticed, if I'm honest, was a smell. 6 weeks before everything happened, Robert came home from a Saturday afternoon he said he'd spent with his friend Dennis at the driving range. He kissed my cheek in the kitchen. He smelled like something floral, soft, feminine, the kind of thing that's pleasant until it isn't. "What's that?" I asked. Dennis's wife was there for part of it. She hugs hello. He shrugged and went to wash his hands. I told myself that was exactly right. Dennis's wife was a hugger. I had experienced this myself. I rinsed the colander and thought about nothing, but my brain filed it. 3 weeks later, Kate came over for Sunday dinner. She leaned in to kiss my cheek when she arrived, same as always, and the scent hit me like a closed fist. Same perfume, exact same, not just similar, identical. "Is that new?" I asked. "Christmas gift," she said brightly, dropping her bag on the hall chair. "You gave it to me. Lily of the Valley. Remember? You said it was too young for you." I did remember. I had bought it in December without thinking too hard. She was right that it suited her better than me. I went to the kitchen to check the roast. I stood at the oven and breathed carefully. Robert had said Dennis's wife. He had said it without hesitation. The particular ease of a man who has rehearsed. I thought, stop it, Miriam. You're catastrophizing. I made a mental note to mention to my doctor that I might be having some anxiety symptoms, and I served dinner, and I watched my husband and my sister interact, and I saw nothing. They were normal, easy, familiar. They sat across the table from each other and talked about a documentary one of them had seen about deep-sea fish, and Robert refilled Kate's wine without her asking. And I sat at the head of my own table and watched and thought, see? Nothing. That's what I kept telling myself. But I started noticing other things. Small things. The kind you dismiss individually because no single one of them amounts to evidence. Robert had started taking longer at the gym. This was October. He had never been a gym person. Suddenly, he was going 3 afternoons a week. He came home slightly flushed, hair damp, and once, in early November, I noticed he'd showered there rather than coming home sweaty. I mentioned it, and he said the locker rooms had been renovated and they were actually nice now. I said that was good. I thought about it for 3 days. In November, Kate canceled 2 plans we had. Coffee on a Tuesday, a walk we'd scheduled for a Saturday morning. Both times she cited work, which was reasonable because she had recently recently taken on a new client at the marketing firm she freelanced for. Both times I said it was fine because it was fine. I just noticed. In December, at Christmas dinner at my cousin Ellen's house, I watched Robert and Kate from across the room, talking near the window while the family swirled around them. I was helping Ellen's daughter Susanna carry dessert plates from the kitchen, and I paused in the doorway, and I watched them for 30 seconds. They were just talking. They were just standing there. There was nothing overt, nothing you could point to and say that, right there. But something about the angle of their bodies, the way they stood in each other's space without adjustment, made my stomach turn once, quietly, like a single note of music in a dark room. Then Ellen called my name, and I walked back into the party, and I told myself I was tired and probably hormonal, and that I was a 56-year-old woman seeing shadows in lamplight. That's the thing about betrayal conducted by people who know you well. They know exactly how much normal to perform. They know your tolerances. They know which explanations you'll accept. They have years of your patterns, years of your trust, and they spend it precisely, incrementally, in amounts small enough not to register as a withdrawal, until the account is empty and you're standing at the door of your own house. Then you notice everything. I left the conference luncheon on a Thursday at 1:52 p.m. I had a headache, and the keynote speaker was a man from a consulting firm who kept saying going forward and synergy, unironically, and I had eaten a small dry piece of chicken that tasted of institutional catering and quiet despair. I texted Robert to say I'd be home by 2:30 instead of 5. He didn't respond. He was, as far as I knew, finishing up a curriculum committee meeting that ran until 3. I parked in the driveway at 2:09 p.m. I noticed Kate's car on the street, a silver Honda CR-V I'd helped her buy when her last car died 2 years ago. I thought, oh good, she stopped by to see him. Family visits, nothing unusual. I opened the front door. It took me 3 seconds to process what I was seeing. 3 seconds is a long time, actually. Long enough for your brain to try every possible alternative explanation. She fell and he caught her. They're watching something on TV together. This is a strange angle. I am misreading this. And discard every single one. Kate was in Robert's lap on my cream couch. His hand was at her waist. Her fingers were in his hair. They were not watching television. I didn't make a sound. I stepped back through the front door and pulled it shut behind me with a quiet click. I walked to my car. I sat down. I put both hands on the steering wheel because they were shaking, and I needed somewhere to put them. I sat there for 4 minutes. I know it was 4 minutes because I watched the clock on the dash move from 2:11 to 2:15, one digit at a time, like counting stitches. Then something happened inside my chest. It wasn't grief, exactly. Not yet. It was something colder, quieter, the feeling of a building settling after the earthquake stops. Everything shifted 6 inches to the left, and I heard it groan and go still. I thought about the camera. 2 years ago, in October, our neighbor Douglas had his garage broken into and his tools stolen. $3,000 worth of equipment taken between midnight and 6 in the morning. The police came, took a report, and left. Robert was incensed. He'd gone online that same afternoon, researched home security systems for 4 hours, and installed a small, high-definition camera in the upper corner of our living room within the week. It connected to an app on his phone. We both forgot about it within a month because nothing ever happened. He had forgotten about it. Kate had forgotten about it. I had not forgotten about it. I had simply stopped thinking about it, which is different. The distinction in that moment mattered enormously. I drove away from the house at 2:16 p.m. I went to a coffee shop 4 miles away. I ordered an Americano and a scone I didn't eat. I sat by the window and watched the street and thought with a clarity I hadn't experienced since the week before my mother's estate went to probate. I had exactly what I needed. I just needed to collect it carefully. I drove home at 6:02 p.m. Kate's car was gone. On Monday morning at 7:48 a.m., I called Mr. Gerald Linwood. Mr. Linwood is a family law attorney in Pasadena. He is 61 years old, has practiced law for 34 years, and handled my mother's estate with a quietness and competence that I found deeply comforting at the worst time of my life. He doesn't make small talk. He doesn't reassure you unless reassurance is warranted. He simply asks what the situation is and tells you what can be done about it. I had barely gotten through my third sentence when he said, "Stop, don't discuss the specifics over the phone. Come in at 10. I was in his office by 9:55. I told him everything. I told him about the scent, about the conference, about walking through the front door. I told him about the camera. He sat across from me with his hands folded on the desk and his reading glasses pushed up on his head, and he listened without expression. When I finished, he said, "This is California. Adultery doesn't directly affect property division, but what it does affect is your ability to make decisions from a position of documentation rather than accusation. That camera footage is potential evidence, but more importantly, it's leverage." He asked me about the financial situation. I told him about our joint accounts, our retirement accounts, the house, which we had purchased in 2003 using, in part, a $68,000 inheritance from my maternal grandmother. Gerald's eyes sharpened at that. "Do you have documentation of the inheritance?" "I have the estate records. I have the wire transfer confirmation." "Good," he said. "Don't touch the joint accounts until we've established a clear asset picture. Don't alert him in any way. Come back Thursday and we'll go through the financial disclosure worksheet together." He handed me a referral card. "This is Patricia Vane. She's a certified divorce financial analyst, CFP with 22 years of experience. She works with my office regularly. Call her before Thursday." I put the card in my purse next to the folded photograph I was still carrying, the one I'd printed that morning after checking the camera app from my phone in the parking parking lot of a Walgreens at 7 a.m. "One more thing," I said at the door. Gerald waited. "My birthday is Saturday. I'd like to have a dinner party first." He looked at me for a moment. "I'd advise against any confrontation before we've completed the—" "Not a confrontation," I said. "A dinner party." He looked at me for another moment. "Be careful." "I will." On Tuesday morning, I drove to City National Bank in Arcadia. My mother had maintained a safe deposit box there for 30 years. After she died, the box had passed to me as her executor. I had gone through most of its contents during the estate process: jewelry, bonds, a copy of her will, the deed to her house, letters. But there was one item I had set aside and sealed back in its original envelope. The week before she died, she was home by then, hospice, the hospital bed in the living room that I slept next to on a cot for 11 nights. She had pressed an envelope into my hands. It was sealed with wax. I don't know where she got wax in 2021, but that was my mother. She had it. The seal was stamped with the letter M. She said, "This isn't for now. This is for when you need it." I said, "What does it say?" She said, "Things I should have told you while there was time. Open it when the time comes." I drove to the bank and sat in a small private room with fluorescent lighting and a steel table, and I read my mother's letter. It took 12 minutes. I'm not going to tell you everything it said. Some of it is mine. But I will tell you this. My mother, who had known Robert for 27 years and had been almost uniformly kind to his face, had watched him more closely than I knew. She wrote about a trip we had all taken to San Francisco in 2017. She wrote about a moment she had witnessed between Robert and Kate at my niece's baby shower in 2019, a moment in a hallway that she described as lingering in a way that troubled her. She wrote about a comment Kate had made on the phone, once, that my mother said she had not repeated at the time because she wasn't sure what she was hearing. She wrote, "I hope I'm wrong. I hope you never need this letter. But I know my daughters and I know that man, and some things a mother sees that a wife cannot." I sat in that room for a few minutes after I finished reading. Then I put the letter back in the envelope, put the envelope in my purse next to the photograph, and drove to Patricia Vane's office in Glendale. Patricia Vane is 53, a certified financial planner with a specialty in high-conflict divorce proceedings. She holds a CFP designation and has testified as a financial expert in family court 17 times. Her office has deliberately beige walls and a bowl of hard candy on the conference table that I suspect is there to give people's hands something to do. She shook my hand firmly and got straight to it. We spent 2.5 hours going through every financial document I had brought: the joint checking account, the retirement accounts, his 403b, my 401k from my teaching years, the equity in the house, the remaining inheritance funds I had transferred, on Gerald's advice, into a new individual account that morning, the brokerage account we'd opened in 2014 and added to every year until we hadn't. Patricia was systematic. She had 3-column spreadsheets and color coding for categories of asset, and she asked very precise questions in a voice that gave nothing away. Every time I provided a document, she said "good" in the tone of someone checking items off a list that will eventually end. At one point, she pulled a bank statement and set it beside another, 2 months apart, and traced a line with her pen. "There's a withdrawal here. $1,400, cash, March 3rd, then again, March 31st, then April 15th. I looked at the statements. I had not noticed those. "Same amount each time," she said, "approximately 6 weeks apart. And then here," she pulled a third statement. "It becomes roughly monthly. May, June, July. Always cash. Always ATM." I looked at the dates. The pattern had been running for 7 months. "I didn't make those withdrawals," I said. "I know," Patricia said, not unkindly. "They're all at an ATM in Monrovia. Your usual branch is in Arcadia. Monrovia, 12 miles east. Close enough to be convenient, far enough to be a different neighborhood than anyone we knew." I sat with that for a moment. "How much total?" Patricia did the math quickly, which told me she had already done it. $9,800. Over 14 months. I thought about Kate canceling coffee in October. I thought about the new gym. I thought about 100 small things that were starting to arrange themselves into a shape I recognized. "Gerald needs to see these," I said. "Yes," Patricia said. "I'll prepare a summary memo he can use in disclosure proceedings." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing coming in before any confrontation. This is much cleaner." I photographed the statements with my phone before I left. When I got home, Robert was in the kitchen cutting up a melon and listening to the radio, and he said, "You look tired. Long day?" "Long day," I agreed. I kissed him on the cheek. He smiled. I thought, $9,800. I smiled back. On Wednesday morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop while Robert ran errands. I logged into the camera app with a coffee I let go cold beside me. I pulled up the footage from Thursday. I didn't watch all of it. I watched enough. 37 seconds of enough. Then I hit stop. I plugged my phone into the laptop, exported a single still frame, 2:17 p.m., timestamp in the corner, everything in frame, everything clear, and sent it to the email account I had opened on Monday. I drove to an Office Depot and printed it on glossy photo paper, 4 inches by 6 inches. Then I drove to Gerald's office and emailed the bank statements to Patricia, and I thought about my birthday dinner, and I started making a list. Not a grocery list. On Thursday, I signed the divorce papers. I want to pause on that sentence because people always imagine this moment as dramatic, tearful, hesitant, a pen hovering. It wasn't like that. It was like signing a lease. My hand was completely steady. Gerald witnessed it. His paralegal, a young woman named Cora, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, witnessed it and offered me a bottle of water from the mini fridge fridge in the corner, and I accepted it. We won't file until you're ready, Gerald said. After Saturday, I said. He nodded. On Friday, I ironed the tablecloth my mother had embroidered by hand 40 years ago. White cotton, blue bonnets along the border, every petal stitched by her hands. I had not used it since the Christmas after she died because I couldn't make myself open the linen drawer. I polished the silver. I got out the crystal that had been a wedding gift from Robert's aunt and had lived in the cabinet ever since. I set the table the way my mother had taught me to set a table. Each piece measured, each glass polished to a clear ring when I held it to the light. I went to bed at 10 o'clock and slept better than I had in months. Kate arrived at 10 Saturday morning, 3 hours before anyone else. She came through the door with the particular energy she gets when she's performing warmth. Bright, expansive, a little too much. She said she wanted to help with the flowers. She had brought lilies, white stargazers still closed, the way she knew I liked them. I let her arrange them in the cut glass vase on the dining room sideboard while I stood in the kitchen pretending to check the roast. She said from the dining room, "This is going to be so lovely. You always do this beautifully, Miri. No one does this like you." I said, "Thank you." She appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her eyes were warm and slightly cautious in the way of a person who is performing warmth for a reason. "You're the best sister in the world," she said. "I really don't tell you that enough." I almost laughed. She was wearing the perfume, the one I had given her for Christmas, the one I had smelled on my husband's collar in March and in April, and again in May, and had explained to myself as Dennis's wife, free sample. I was being paranoid. "You don't have to tell me," I said sweetly. "I've always known." She smiled like I had paid her the deepest compliment. She went back to her flowers, and I stood at the kitchen counter and breathed and let the cold quiet move through me again like a river that had found its final direction. By 6:30 that evening, every seat was filled. Helen and David across from each other. Helen was my oldest friend, 29 years, a retired social worker with a particular gift for sitting quietly inside a room's atmosphere and reading what the room is actually saying. She had looked at me carefully the moment she walked in the doorway, before she even took off her coat. She'd given me a hug and pulled back and looked at my face and said nothing at all, and I had understood that she knew something was happening and that she was with me. She didn't know the specifics. I hadn't told her. But Helen had spent 23 years as a social worker, and she had a sense for when the surface of a situation is not the situation. She sat down across from David and she watched the room. Emily and Daniel, our neighbors to the left, a couple in their early 60s who had been to this table 100 times. Emily had brought a bottle of Napa Cabernet. Daniel had a laugh that came easily and that I have always found genuinely warming. They were comfortable people in the best sense. They made the air in a room feel lighter just by occupying it. Kate at my right hand, composed, easy in the way she is when she has decided to be easy, a brightness that she wears rather than feels. She had changed since morning into a blue dress I'd never seen before. She helped pass the bread. She asked Emily about the Portugal trip and listened with her chin on her hand. And Robert at the end of the table. Robert, in the blue shirt I had ironed for him on Friday without thinking about it because 40 years of reflex is hard to interrupt. His reading glasses pushed up on his head, his good watch. He looked from that angle exactly like my husband, exactly like the man I had sat across tables from and driven to airports and argued with about paint colors and tax returns and whether to sell the car. He refilled glasses. He made the joke about the wine label. He told Daniel a story about a curriculum meeting that had gone off the rails. He was warm and present and completely convinced he was safe. I watched him from the end of the table opposite, and I thought about my mother pressing the sealed envelope into my hands. I thought about the ATM in Monrovia. I thought about 37 seconds of footage I had watched one time on a laptop screen in my kitchen while my coffee went cold. I let him believe he was safe. We ate the first course, a white bean soup I had made from a recipe my mother gave me, which she had gotten from her mother, which is the sort of thing you think about at strange moments. I asked Daniel about his son's graduate program in mechanical engineering at UCLA. I asked Emily about the tiles they'd found in Lisbon. I listened and responded and passed the salt and was for every observable purpose exactly who I had always been at this table. Helen kept watching me. Robert put his hand on my shoulder when he came around behind my chair to refill the water glasses, the way he always does at dinner parties, the small possessive warmth of it, and he said, "Happy birthday, love," low, near my ear, the way you say something to a person you have known for 3 decades and believe you will know for 3 more. "Thank you," I said. "It means everything." He believed me. That was the part I will think about for a long time. Not the betrayal, the belief, the sheer, unhesitating confidence with which he sat at my table and kissed my cheek and said happy birthday. Love while my mother's tablecloth lay under his wine glass, and the photograph sat in a folder beneath my plate, and Gerald Linwood had already filed my signature. At 7:14 p.m., I set down my fork. I picked up my knife and tapped my crystal glass. The sound rang out clear and high and clean, a note that hung in the air for a moment before the room went quiet. Everyone looked at me. All the warm faces of the people I loved, arranged around my table, looking at me with the easy warmth of people who have eaten well and expect a toast. Robert smiled the broadest of all. "Before we continue," I said, standing, "I want to say a few words." "Oh, wonderful," Emily said, touching Daniel's arm, leaning in. "I've been thinking this week," I said, "about the things we take for granted, the people we trust without question, the loyalty we offer freely, and what we assume is offered in return." I paused. I looked around the table. Helen Helen was the only one not smiling. She was watching me with the still focused attention of a woman who has heard 1,000 rooms and knows what silence before the break sounds like. I've been thinking about what it means to know someone, to really know them, after years, after decades, to still believe you know what they're capable of. Robert's smile held, but something moved behind his eyes. A flicker, a pilot light catching. I want to talk about this house, I said. About the 23 years Robert and I have lived here. About all the evenings we've sat at this table, with the people we love, who we trust, who we have invited into our home. About all the afternoons when we assumed no one was watching. The flicker in Robert's eyes became something else. Became recognition, then calculation, then a kind of controlled dread, traveling from his eyes to his jaw to his hands, which went very still on the table. Beside me, Kate inhaled once, a tiny, involuntary sound. She didn't move otherwise. 2 years ago, I said. Douglas next door had his garage broken into. It was awful. $3,000 of tools gone overnight. Robert was incensed. He researched home security systems for 4 hours and installed a camera in the corner of our living room. High definition, time-stamped. I looked at my husband. Do you remember, Robert? He said nothing. You said you wanted us to feel safe. The room was very quiet. I reached down and opened the folder. I took out the photograph. I held it up so every person at the table could see it, and then I set it down in the center of my mother's embroidered tablecloth. Among the blue bonnets her hands had stitched, and I stepped back. Helen saw it first. Her hand flew to her mouth and knocked her water glass. Daniel's hand shot out and caught it. And then Daniel looked, and the color drained from his face like a tap had been opened. Emily said very quietly, "Oh God." The room was the kind of silence that happens after something large and irreversible has occurred. Not shocked silence. Understanding silence. The silence of people reading a document clearly written, taking in its full meaning. I looked at Robert. He was looking at the photograph. Then he looked at me. His face went through several expressions in the space of a few seconds. I watched them pass like weather and settled into something I had never seen before. Not guilt, exactly. Something older than guilt. Something like recognition of a thing long known and long deferred. He said nothing. I looked at Kate. She was looking at the tablecloth. Her jaw moved once and stopped. Her hands were flat on the table on either side of her plate. 28 years, I said. I was not performing calm. I was calm. The cold quiet had long since settled into something I could carry. I want you both to know that I am not angry. I'm past anger. What I am is done. I picked up my wine glass. This is my birthday, I said. And tonight is the last night I will spend in this house as Robert's wife. I thought, given everything, the people at this table deserved to know why. I drank. The candles burned. The lilies Kate had arranged stood in the cut glass vase on the sideboard, still slightly closed, the way I had always liked them. Robert said finally, in a voice I had never heard from him, tight, precise, very controlled, "Miriam, can we? Gerald Linwood will be in contact on Monday," I said. "He has my signature already. We'll begin disclosure proceedings regarding the house, the accounts, the retirement funds. He's also aware of the cash withdrawals from the joint account. $9,800, 14 months, an ATM in Monrovia. Patricia Vane has documented all of it." Something shifted in Robert's face at that. A different kind of recognition. Not the recognition of being caught in the act. The recognition of the deeper architecture of what I had done. The timeline, the attorney, the financial analyst, the week of quiet preparation that he had sat beside without seeing. "The camera has been there for 2 years, I said. You installed it yourself, after Douglas's garage. Do you remember? You specifically said, you wanted us to feel safe." I set my glass down. I picked up my plate, walked to the kitchen, set it on the counter. I came back to the doorway and stood there. Helen was already out of her chair. She had not spoken a word. She crossed the room with her back straight, and she put her arm around my shoulders and stood beside me. And I breathed once, really breathed, for the first time in 8 days. "Happy birthday," she said quietly, into my hair. Emily said, "Kate." Her voice had gone completely flat. The warmth gone, what remained was just weight. "You need to go." Kate stood. She did not look at Robert. She did not look at Emily or Daniel or Helen. She picked up her bag, her coat, her keys from the sideboard where she had set them when she arrived that morning, full of lilies and warmth and nerve. Her heels on the hardwood floor in the silence of the room made the kind of sound a clock makes at the end of its running. At the door, she stopped. She turned and looked at me across the room. I don't know what she was looking for. Absolution, softening, some version of me that would, even now, be her older sister in the way I had always been her older sister, catching her, explaining her, excusing her. Some version of me that would take this too. I looked back at her, without expression, without anger, without anything she could use. She left. The door clicked shut behind her. That same quiet click. I will tell you the afterword briefly, because you deserve it. Gerald filed the papers on Monday. Robert did not contest the primary terms. I believe, though I have not confirmed this, that he was advised by his own attorney not to, given the documentation. Patricia Vane identified a total of $9,800 in unauthorized withdrawals from our joint account over 14 months, which had a clarifying effect on Robert's willingness to negotiate. He moved to an apartment in Monrovia by the end of the month. The house is mine. It was always, technically, partially mine in a way that the paperwork now reflects accurately. Gerald was thorough. He is worth every cent. Kate called me twice. I did not answer. She sent a letter. Handwritten. 5 pages. The kind of letter that tries to carry more weight than any letter can hold. I read it in one sitting. I set it on the kitchen table and I sat with it for an hour. Then I put it in the recycling bin and made tea. Helen came over for dinner 3 weeks after the birthday party. We sat on my back porch, my porch mine, with a bottle of wine and the citronella candles going. And the night was warm enough to sit outside and the jasmine was coming in over the fence. And she said, "How are you actually?" "I'm actually fine," I said. "That's not nothing," she said. "No," I agreed. "It really isn't. My mother's tablecloth is back in the linen drawer. I will use it again. I haven't yet decided for what occasion, but I know it will be worth it when I do." The camera is still in the corner of the living room. I never turned it off. I don't watch the footage. I just know it's there, which feels, these days, like enough. Some people have asked me whether I regret waiting, whether I should have confronted him immediately, screamed, thrown something, done what people do in movies. I understand the impulse, but I spent 28 years building a life, and when it came apart, I wanted it to come apart on terms I understood and could live with. I wanted evidence. I wanted my name on the documents. I wanted my mother's tablecloth under the table and her letter in my purse and my signature already on the papers before any of them knew what I knew. I wanted to stand up at my own birthday table, in my own house, and tell the truth, and I did. If you've made it this far, you already know how it ends. Not with screaming, not with throwing things, with a photograph, a timestamp, and the particular silence of a room full of people who finally understand what they're looking at. That was enough. That was exactly enough.